means to figure out what we do with this information and where we go from here. So this is basically a summary kind of a meeting and a look to the future meeting to see what the results of this were. The February housing presentation by Andrea Aldana and Marcia Algaya was positively received, at least from my point of view, what we heard from the people. 78 people from the community and town committees logged into the Zoom conference, and it was also watched on Channel 18. Following the live forum, both presentations were uploaded to the Affordable Housing Committee page on the town website so that people could easily review the data and concepts presented. Emails, conversations, newspaper articles, and an interview on Cape TV followed the presentation. Our goal as a committee was to share information, spark conversation, and encourage continued dialogue among various town committees. This has begun, and we hope it will continue. Our task today is to review what has been shared and to plan for our next steps. I've made a copy of what I'm saying for all of you to follow along. I would like you to, I'm going to read it all because I think it's valuable, and then as you're reading along with me, make a note of something that gets your attention, or write down something that you heard that maybe I didn't get. So I think this is fill in the blanks kind of thing. So. Okay.
Thank you.
1, 2, 3, oh, jeez. There's 3 there. One more. Andrea, do you want one? Okay. The first section is question and answer period on February 1st. After the presentations we made, we opened it up for discussion, and these are some of the points that were made. Consider climate change and good building practices. Realize it can add 3 to 4% to the general cost. Accessory dwelling units came up, short-term versus long-term rental choices. The need for universal design, to be aware of steps, how many steps there are for people, mixed housing, and mixed generation housing. The point came loud and clear, housing stress is increasing daily. Greater density is more cost-effective and easier on environment as we work toward net zero. Increased funding is needed by the town to meet the cost of creating housing. Sewer availability is crucial, contrast Governor Prince versus 107 Main. It's difficult to keep police, fire, and EMTs when they cannot afford housing. Town invests significant money in training and notes concerns for public safety and dwindling number of applicants and competition from other area towns. Suggestions and questions from emails and conversations after the February 1st dialogue. Think how to reach seasonal homeowners to be sure they are aware of the housing issues. Offer PSAs shown at summer events, 4th of July parade, donations to a special fund for housing. Consider subsidies to police, fire, and EMTs. Build affordable homes for entry-level employees. Respect both seasonal non-residents and full-time residents and recognize what they both bring to the economy. Consider continued clarification of housing terms and explain how projects, locations, and needs are selected. Determine how housing can be more inclusive and more included in the town budget and its planning. Regulate or tax seasonal rental market to increase availability of affordable year-round rentals. Incentivize builders, employers, landlords to ease rental and home ownership costs. Investigate buy-down programs. Consider establishing a charitable trust for police and fire housing. Investigate creative financing toward future home ownership. Investigate 2 dwellings on 1 lot zoning. I'm going to stop there for just a minute. And I am impressed that people responded with some of these things. A lot of things we've talked about, some of them we haven't talked about, but the fact that it generated discussion on these, I think is exciting, and I think it lends itself to a way to plan for the future. all ideas are not equal, all ideas maybe not possible, but I think they're all worth considering because they came from the public, and the public is responding to the work that we're doing, the work we're trying to do, and the work we would like to succeed at. So, anyone before I go to the next part, I thought maybe I could, any comments or questions on any of that? I know you just saw it today, but just,
Actually, I have a quick comment about this. Do we have a summer residence meeting? I know that the town of Chatham has like a summer residence, people
oh,
who,
yeah, you do. I think you do. We have one for taxes, I think, or
Yeah,
something.
It's not it's a non-resident
Talk into
taxpayers
the
meeting.
machine.
So it's slightly different, and it's a much narrower agenda.
okay.
There could be a place for it maybe there, I don't know.
Yeah, just on that first bullet point.
Sure. Susan?
When I watched the presentation via Zoom, I had made a note that kind of matches one of these things, sort of, which was really a question. There's so many homes that sit vacant for sometimes a whole year. Is there any precedent for incentives for homeowners who don't live in their homes? Tax breaks, subsidization, something that could encourage rentals to families? Is that
I remember that came up with one of Elisa Magnata's presentations with Hack. I think she had some sort of program where they were reaching out to homeowners that were not.
They had
Yes,
a
that's true.
$1,000 bonus if you would take your rental from the
That's right.
summer to a year-round rental and try,
Yeah.
and they also offered to offered to help find you someone to rent with as well, because that's one of their other, so that was, and they did have some response to that.
Had some response. I think they did 25 in the Mid-Cape area. But it's not something that's feasible in our area because our seasonal rents are so high that $1,000
Yeah.
doesn't make it for people as an incentive. But it's an interesting concept, not to put it aside, but to think about tweaking it in some ways, maybe.
That'll make it more interesting to folks.
I'm really impressed with the number of comments and the breadth of the comments and the actual understanding that people have of the issues, that I think we want to hear as much of this as we possibly can.
Anyone else? I think there are some good things in this list that we could have a joint meeting with the trust and sort of talk about some ways of making some of these things possibly happen as well. So I think it's good. And I also feel I want to take a little tiny bit of credit for our committee that we have been sending out some information and people have responded to it.
Yes.
They may have more questions, but,
Yeah.
and they may need more clarification, but I've had some wonderful conversations with people over the last couple of weeks and just trying to clarify and to see where they are. And well, the people I suppose who are complaining don't call me, but maybe call somebody else. But the people that I did speak to were pro-housing.
Yeah.
And they were pro trying to figure this out. So, I think the idea of this event was good. I think we probably need to do another one fairly in a while to see where we are. So I think it's really important.
I think that Chief McDonald's comment at the end was really powerful. And I think he really opened the door to that conversation about what do we do for people who don't necessarily qualify for our subsidies
Right.
that are of an household income somewhat above that, but cannot enter either the housing market or rental. And maybe we just really need to think about, is there something else we can do to facilitate, even though our monies can't be used for that group of people, but is there something we can do to facilitate programs that would be helpful to them?
and maybe find other sources of money that can be used, or can be
Yeah.
like a conservation trust, but like a housing trust, not a housing trust, but a housing charitable contribution
Yeah.
that might help toward that other, and that would be there. So I think people were thinking that way, and that was exciting. We talked about this in this committee. I have a little section in one of my binders on charitable trusts for homes. That was a couple of years ago, and we never got to that point, but I think there are some places where it might work in some regard. So, in the buy-down program
Yes,
that we,
similarly.
that, you know, we don't know all the numbers for that, but we can maybe look into that if that's of interest to people, to see if there's some way that it can affect our Orleans prices. Our Orleans prices are very high, so there may not be enough of a gap for the funding.
Truro has a buy-down program,
Yep.
and there was an article, I think, recently in the paper
Yeah.
about how over the last 10 years, they've done 10 buy-down
Right.
opportunities. 10 over 10 years isn't a lot, but
It's 10
nonetheless,
homes.
it's something.
It is something that addresses that issue that you just raised.
Exactly.
And
Oh, no,
No,
because
doesn't
that
it?
has to be for people who qualify for subsidy.
Oh, okay.
Yep, there's so many restrictions that limit what we can do, but
But could you create something?
Yes, it would
That-
have to
that
be
would-
it would have to be separate from the Affordable Housing Trust or committee.
Oh, okay. Because it has to be capital A. What we do has to be capital
Capital A.
affordable, okay.
in the Wellfleet article that was sent to us as well, did I send that to you about Wellfleet? There was a person had sold her house at a lower price so that it could be bought by a person who needed to have it, and it could also be put deed restricted if that was a possibility, or not deed restricted, but this desire to sell at a loss, which I don't know how many people are that giving, but this person happened to be quite giving and decided it was important for her not to make a lot of money, but to make sure that this house got to her family. So I think there are a lot of people in our area who might feel that might be something they might like to do. So I think, I believe we have big projects, and we're working on getting big projects in here, but they're not here today. And whatever we can do to fill in some of these gaps and get a house or get something done while we're waiting for Penrose and 107 Main and Governor Prince to materialize, there may be some things we can do to help people prior to that happening, so.
Nancy, can I just tell you one other thing that came up after the meeting? The trust met, and the idea of an employee benefit program came up, which sounded great, the way, so the town, you can't use the federal and state money that way, but the idea of an employee benefit program that was connected to housing came up, and we were reminded that it's not possible. So that 501(c) is going to be even more important, because employees can't accept any gifts over $50. So it's interesting, as we get more constrained about what's possible, it forces our creativity to come up with things that satisfy the law and get the job done that you want to do.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, on the next page, I just wanted to, upcoming actions to consider. Last week, Alan McLennan and I went to visit Chief McDonald and Chief Deering for a brainstorming as a follow-up to your comments about his comments, just to see what the issues were. He brought up some of the issues generally, but at the presentation, and also, there was also an interview on Cape TV with Scott McDonald as well. And there was an article in the paper with a big picture of Scott McDonald in his uniform. So that got a lot of coverage, but it also hit a chord with people. And that's great, because we talk about that all the time. We talk about the need, but it really is, it's a human need. And he spoke seriously to the human need on a variety of levels, town and individual levels. So we went and just had a discussion with him, sort of what are some of the things that they are facing, and what they thought might be, in a perfect world, what would be good to happen. And then, of course, it was, now we need to see if any of these ideas could work. So I'm hoping that they'll, again, with the trust together, the two groups can come together and maybe talk about that as well on the agenda in the near term, so we can, I won't go into a lot of detail on it, but it basically reinforced that this is not a light subject. This is something that really affects our town, and it affects the people who are working in our town, and it affects the services in our town. And we are very lucky to have two high-quality police and fire departments, and they want to maintain that. They want that to stay high quality. And I think housing is impacting that like every other job around here. So we didn't step out of our roles as committee leaders, but we felt that it was good to follow up on that and get some more data for that, so. Also, coming up in April, we are having a finance committee. We're scheduled to meet with the finance committee in April. We moved that from January. I do not know the focus for this discussion, and my question will be, is it affordable housing or is it affordable housing trust discussion? Because if it's basically finance, then it may just be a trust discussion. But we have not heard the details for that, but that is on the horizon as well. That is the only group that has invited us since our presentation. I
They
was
actually
hoping.
invited us before that, right?
They invited us before that, that's true, yeah. But we haven't had anything, but our decision was, I thought, before this presentation, that we would wait until someone invited us to come, as opposed to going out and doing a presentation to them. So we are available and ready and willing to entertain to visit any committee that would like to know more about affordable housing. Put that on the record, so,
And to hear what their wishes and concerns are,
sure.
and their role.
It seems, it's very clear, even from this overview that I shared with you, is that people are coming at this from a variety of angles, in a variety of perspectives, in a variety of what they want from it. And the only way we're going to know that is to talk to people. So hopefully that will happen sooner than later as we go through the rest of this year.
I think that, I think it's great, the comments that came through. But as you relate to what you said, the amount and the different comments that come through, I think going forward, we need to be careful as to what we can actually do with some of these, because there's a lot of these ideas that are beyond our purview. They're great ideas and should be followed up on, but I think us going forward need to be a little cautious about what we take on trying to do to make sure that we stay within our wheelhouse, if you will, about what we can actually deal with. So I think it's a great start. I'm really impressed with all these comments, yeah.
And I agree with you, and I think that's the reason I typed these out for us, because I think you really need to think who would be, where we should go for these. And I think that's going to take a little while, maybe between now and the next meeting, to really come up with what you just said was,
Yeah.
what would be the most effective route to any of these. So, just want to check to see if Marcia emailed me.
Can I ask Andrea a question on, as a result of the event that we held? Did you get any feedback from any of the other committees, boards that might be interested in meeting with us? Or did it generate questions or comments, or was it more of, yeah, we heard that before?
Oh,
type of-
no,
Okay,
no, it was
all right.
not that at all. And I
Okay.
think, if your role is, if you think of the kind of umbrella advocacy
Mm.
that is the strength of your mission, there are tools. I think the meeting with the trust is an excellent idea, because it will help you sort through anything you want to take on versus what they want to take on. But there are some tools that may be opening up for the community, like bonding. And you guys can be the clearinghouse for, is that a tool that's really practical, or is this a way to go forward, starting a 501c? We've been talking about that on the trust. Katie's not here, but there's been a champion of starting a 501c separate from the trust for people to donate houses and land that can be used more flexibly than the trust rules. But again, looking for champions. And some of the comments for people who own houses but don't live here year-round, who are very interested in getting engaged, but we as a community don't have a way to engage them proactively yet. So the idea of a newsletter around housing or an updated webpage, fuller materials, it could go in any direction you guys want to take it, but yet there was very constructive feedback.
Okay, good, thank you.
I thought one of the comments was determine, this came up several times, I tried to write it as politely as possible, determine how housing can be more included in the town budget and planning. There was quite several comments about that, and the comments whether how much planning is being done by the town, how much money is being designated by the town, and I think that is something worthy of a discussion as well as Select Board, Housing Trust, and Housing Committee. You know, most of these questions I didn't answer. I mostly spoke to people and said, yes, we will consider them, but I think that's one that came up more than once. So I think that's something to consider, and I think that goes back to that 501c3 maybe, there's a vehicle for that. Who is pushing that? Or just a general discussion? Who, is somebody leading it?
No, there's been a champion, Henry Brem has been the champion for the last 2 years on the committee, but we haven't quite, like you, it's a young trust, there have been a lot of projects forward, and he and I have talked about it since last
Okay.
spring, but there needs to be a center of gravity for anything to move forward, enough people engaged, so it's an idea floating out there.
Thanks. Okay. All right. Other things in that area, we also need to decide on any needed action for town meeting that's coming up in May. Do we need to support anything for CPC funding and the bonding, or is that already set? That's something else we just need to talk about. Marcia was gonna talk about that.
Yeah.
And these next three are actually mine after talking to everybody, and I put them in this form, because I really believe our committee has a responsibility for these three things: to be proactive in tracking the progress of the underground mall plans and concerns. I feel there's a lot of talk about that in that project. It has a possibility of having small A affordable rentals that will be available for people, and a good number of deed-restricted units for us, for affordable housing. And lots of things get in the way of some of the decisions in the town, and I think we need to be alert to how we can support that, if we can support that. So we also need to be proactive in tracking the progress on Governor Prince regarding housing design, funding, and community engagement. I know we have a representative, but I think we probably need to step out a little further on that one once things get a little clearer. And we also need to be proactive in tracking the progress of the Economic Development Group as it relates to housing. All these things that are happening at the same time, but they're going to converge somewhere on the housing piece. And we need to be ready and informed so that we can have a response when necessary. And I think that requires us watching some of these meetings and listening and trying to keep up with what's going on. And that is my opinion, and I hope that's the opinion of the rest of you, because I just stated it as my opinion, but is there anyone who disagrees with those three things?
No, I agree.
I agree too.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm not stepping out on the ledge by myself. Okay. I think we also need to, Andrew just mentioned a newsletter. I think we need to update the community, and this might be another one for the trust and the Affordable Housing Committee. Where are we on the timeline for Penrose and 107 Main? When does that housing planning become a reality? I mean, we sort of know that internally, and we sort of know what's going on, but as far as when the first articles came out about all these things into completion, it's a long time when people are frustrated and they want to see some action. And on one hand, they do understand that it's a process, but I think we need to maybe be a little clearer on why it's such a long process. It's not just financing, it's a lot of things that have to be done.
One of the things that makes that really hard is
It is, Marcia.
that the developers have to go through the town permitting process. And then, in the case of Penrose and 107 Main, when they get their 40B permit, they have to then go through the funding rounds, where they may or may not get funds at a state and federal level. So it's hard to predict, and in any case, those funding rounds are once a year and then maybe a shorter time halfway through. So,
They're allowed to go more than once if they don't get in the first round.
exactly, so
So
it
that is,
takes forever.
it does, so, but I think,
And you're right, people need to understand that, because not everybody does.
Yeah.
You're right, yeah.
Nancy, you mentioned a housing newsletter. Does something like that exist?
no.
Oh.
We have a community one that Andrea did there, what is it, what are we now, Exit 85 or something?
Oh, Exit 89.
What are we now?
A newsletter.
Exit 89.
Yeah.
And they have put some things in about housing, and Andrea has her own newsletter, and she puts out some things about housing. But no, we don't have
But we do have, and I'm pitching it to the select board, we do have, with the new website today, I hope you all have seen it.
I did see it.
Went live at around 11 o'clock this morning. The capacity to send out targeted newsletters now to anybody who's on our communications link
Really?
as a town. So for instance, if you did want to do an update on 107 Main or Penrose, you could just ask them for their update, drop it into our template, get Sarah to create a template for you, and you could send out a newsletter at will.
Well,
We
that's
have, so
exciting.
your capacity to communicate has just taken a leap, all town departments.
Well,
all
good.
committees.
well, we can decide what we want to say and get an update on those projects.
Wow.
Great.
Thank you for that.
Okay. And the last two on this list were, consider additional ways to supplement housing and rental stock while waiting for major units to be built. And I think that is a niche that we can work on. Decide, and then today we're going to work on data needs and resources for the next 10-year plan. We are in the midst of our first 10-year plan, and it's working as far as where we're going, but that doesn't mean we've solved the housing crisis when we complete our first 10-year plan, but we will have come closer to helping some people. So this is a living document, I guess. I would like you to spend a little more time with it, think about how you might like to go, what direction you might like to go first, second, third. Maybe we could decide what we don't want to deal with at all, and we can also decide what we want to deal with the trust. and, the select
Nancy?
board. Hi, Marcia, I'm glad you came.
I am so sorry. I got caught up in something else and I meant to be there. I really apologize.
That's all right, we're just coming up to your part right now, so we're gonna
Okay.
be happy. But, and I will share with you the information that I just shared with the committee, because it's very helpful.
Yes, sorry about that.
All right, so that's sort of your homework between now and the next meeting, to sort of see what you'd like to do with this. And was there anything else that anyone else heard? Was gonna ask that before, had comments that maybe were not covered in here? Did anybody talk to you as a member of the committee?
I heard two comments, well, I heard lots of comments, very positive, but two comments that stood out for me. For one person, they felt overwhelmed with so much information they just simply couldn't absorb, which is understandable. And for the other person who has been following it, it was a little too elementary.
So, it's all the people, can we?
Size. I think we hit the middle.
Yeah, right.
No. Anyone else? Or any personal comments about how you think it went before I stop this talk?
I was just sharing that as a newbie, listening to it, for me, it was overwhelming with just rich, dense data and websites and facts and figures. And I was trying to take notes, and I finally just kind of stopped. But I thought it was wonderful. mean, it's made me want to go back to the presentation and take it more slowly and dig into things a little more. But it's hard to believe anyone would have thought it was too elementary. Oh, my.
All right. Well, I think that was valuable to share what people have given us, because
Yeah,
we are
thank you for doing that.
we've been trying really hard to engage the community, and I think we went up a little level through this, and I hope we can continue to do that as well. All right. Marcia sent out her revised data plan as of February 23rd, 2022, and the goal of this, the reason for this data plan is because we've been requested to update some of our facts and figures as we plan for the next round of our 10-year plan and see what's valid now and what we need to know for the future. So she's come up with this plan. It's exhaustive. It has quite a lot in it. So the purpose of this meeting is to maybe set some priorities, set a timeline, see if there's any barriers, and to see if we can maybe work toward getting a consultant funded through the Affordable Housing Trust Board to help us get some of this data. So after that, I'll let Marcia go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I meant to be there, and let me get through the major parts of this, and then we can certainly extend as you need. Why don't I just walk through very quickly the main elements? The first part is the content of what we would. It's more than an update. It's to update what we've done before, but also to expand. So we can walk through the contents of it. And then the second part is basically the process, and then finally the timeline for it. And as Nancy pointed out, there's a lot in here. And part of what we have to do in getting a consultant is to figure out what is feasible to get done within the time frame and also within a reasonable budget. So part of this also is going for funding, and I'm suggesting going to the trust board for funding to get a consultant to help us do that work. So let me just go down very quickly the list that's in front of you, and then to the extent that you feel that it's very important or we can do without it, that would be very helpful. So I get some sense of relative priorities. So in terms of the content, obviously, we're talking about changes as revealed in the 2020 census, since that is the basis for much of the housing need that came through in the 2017 study. So we will definitely do that. So we'll take the major indicators of need, which is, as I've said to through presentations, is one gap analysis. You look at your housing stock, figure out what you should have in terms of types and levels of cost, and then figure out where your gaps are. And that is most important, I think, for rental stock, since we have so little rental units, so few rental units. So a lot of what we have to figure out is what kind of rental stock we need, and within that, what types of rental stock and at what rent levels in order to serve whatever need we feel we must serve. So we'll continue to do that rental gap analysis. We'll also do the cost burden analysis, which, if you remember, is looking at what households can afford given what they earn in wages, and whether or not it takes up more than 30% of their income, disposable income, or as much as 50% or more of their income. And that's considered cost burden. More than 30% is cost burden, and more than 50% is severely cost burden. So obviously we would try to update. Those numbers come from the detailed census, the decennial census. So we will get the census information and go into some detail in terms of those two indicators. So is there any question on those two sort of basic components of housing need? No? Okay, so then the next part is to what extent we want to project need into the future. There is a current analysis that projects needs out to 2025. There was a Cape Cod Commission study that did some rental projection or some projections based on economic projections. and projected needed out to 2025. Obviously, we would like to get that further out. I'm still doing some research as to whether anybody is doing basic economic and population projections, and I have not found that. That can be a major undertaking. So whether or not we would have just our consultant do it, or whether there's other ways that we can get more, basically it's a regional economic and need projection. So that probably needs a little bit more work, but obviously we want to go beyond what we need today and then look at what we need in 5 years and 10 years. So any particular questions on that?
So Marcia, you're suggesting that other affordable housing committees and other towns could sort of collaborate on that kind of piece of a report to generate regional data?
Well, actually, it gets kind of complicated when they do that projections. So the projection it was done by consultant Crane Associates, being paid for and under the auspices of the Cape Cod Commission, and that was pretty major work. So I think it would be hard for us to just do our own projections, because much of what you're projecting is not just everything that's happening to the population within the boundaries of Orleans, but what is happening to labor force, what is happening to economic conditions, what is happening to general population, certainly in the county, if not broader region. So I'm not sure that that would be easy to do. So I'm indicating that this is an area that needs a little bit more work, and it might be included in an RFP for a consultant, but whether the consultant would say, well, I have to hire another economic consultant and it requires a lot more work, we'd have to feel our way through it, because that could be a fairly complicated and expensive venture.
But on the other hand, that is one of the big questions that everybody asks us. How do we
It
know
is,
if we
it
have
is.
enough? How do we know if we need any more? How is the whole Cape building affordable housing? And is it too much or too little or whatever? And that is a question that everybody's asking, and it might be a really good regional approach, because everybody's building and wondering what that answer is.
Right, and I've been talking to Chloe Schaefer, who's the chief planner for the Cape Cod Commission, and I've asked her to, they're thinking of doing an update for the projections, so if the Cape Cod Commission does it, that would solve our problems.
That would be
There
great to
might be other
encourage.
ways, I'm sorry?
That would be a good thing to encourage.
Yes, yes, and she was positive on that. It was just a matter of what their workload was and their funding for it is.
Andrea?
Marcia, can I ask you also, not just the Cape Cod Commission, but I believe the Cape Cod Foundation has just been through a large study, as well
Okay.
as the Cape Cod Chamber. There might be pieces of information from these other regional groups.
Right, and the other thing is, we're doing that economic development plan work now. George has his consultant doing it. So to the extent that they come out with data in terms of growth of businesses and therefore growth in needs of labor force, that can also feed into some kind of projections. It might not be complete, but it would give us pieces of what growth is going to be in the future.
And the other side of that, it seems to me, is we need to do some discussing as a community about what do we want? What's our end
Yeah.
game?
Yes, that's true. Now, that's a fairly major thing, how much do you want the community